Hello, everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on understanding the role of a principal engineer. This webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack to answer some of the questions in the Staff Plus channel. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those to the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll get to them if we can towards the end. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about an exciting project. For the first time ever, LeadDev is launching a Staff Plus conference. The event will take place in New York on April 5th and will be hosted by Tina Riley, who I had the joy of working with on the Staff Plus Live conference in September. The speaker lineup includes Sylvia Botros, Brian Lyles, who also will have here today with us, and Leslie Chapman. So I would recommend checking out the LeadDev Staff Plus event page for more details. So let's get started with some introductions. My name is Blanca Garcia-Gill, and today I'll be joined by Brian Lyles, Lynn Clark, Nayana Shetty, and Stephan Smith to share their experiences and insights. I'll ask each of you to please introduce yourself and please share why you're excited to be on this panel today. I'm just going to go around in alphabetical order. Brian, would you mind going first?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Brian Lyles. I am a principal engineer at VMware. And in my area of the world, we focus on edge and service providers. You might know it as telco. And so, yes, I am the lead engineer of 5G at VMware. I'm happy to be here today. My career has stemmed from every bit of technology that has gotten us to the current vision of cloud and edge. I started with ISPs and did web hosting, helped create an actual cloud, worked for a very large cloud cloud user, a very large bank. And I just want to end with this. It's interesting as we move into staff to principal to whatever's next. I'm a VP level engineer at VMware. And so what we're going to see today is that the title principal engineer starts a huge divergence of responsibility, and influence and other things. So I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Amazing. Can't wait to hear more. Next up, Lynn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Clark. I actually started my journey as a principal engineer at Mozilla and then moved into the senior principal role at Fastly, where I work in the office of the CTO and specifically on WebAssembly. But most people actually know me because of a thing called Code Cartoons, which is a series of stick figure drawings of different programming concepts and software architecture concepts. And that I think has actually played into my work as a principal engineer. So I'm excited to talk about that, and also just excited to be here because I know that when I was moving up the path, I did not actually understand what the principal role was at all. I didn't understand the extent to which I was actually already doing principal kind of stuff, and the extent to, some of the things that I could focus on to make myself a more compelling candidate for the principal role. So I'm excited to share those kinds of unexpected things that you can do to move along to the principal level.
Thank you, Lynn. I really recommend you check out those web cartoons. They are amazing. Let's move on to Nayana, please.
When I learn how to unmute myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Nayana Shetty, and I'm a principal engineer at the Lego Group. And I actually started being a principal engineer when I was at the Financial Times, and I've just recently moved to the Lego Group. And the Lego Group have been going through this massive digital transformation. And as part of this, my role is to help out with the architecture as well as the engineering practices. And I'm focusing mainly on the marketing and channels technology, which is basically the way we sell Lego products to both customers on lego.com as well as to our B2B customers. So that's what my role is. My previous experience has been in site reliability and quality by design. So that is kind of the expertise that I bring in, but more related to how we apply these in product teams. So yeah, that's me. And as we've heard from Lynn and Brian, the principal engineer role is very different across organizations. So I'm very curious to know how different people got here and what their journey was, and also share our tips on what we did so far and how we are influencing the organization and creating an impact within the organizations we are. So yeah, excited about that.
Welcome, Nayana. I'm super excited too. And finally, Stephan.
Hi, yeah, I'm Stephan Smith. I'm actually joining you from a co-working space because my home internet failed today, so I'm in unusual surroundings, hopefully not too echoey. And I'm a principal engineer at Gusto, which is a company here in the UK that lets people subscribe to weekly recipe boxes that contain precise ingredients and recipe cards. And it lets them basically create exciting meals from scratch at home. I've got many years' experience as a technical lead at various startups and global companies. And I've also been a software consultant at ThoughtWorks. And most recently, I was also a solutions architect at AWS. Here at Gusto, I help engineering management identify and address some of the biggest challenges that we have with scaling as an org. So that's things like architecture design, developer productivity. And yeah, it's just great to be here today. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. I've been a principal engineer for just 6 months. I'm actually the first principal engineer at my organization. So it's super interesting to compare experiences. And I'd love to share any insights I have for people growing into the role as well.
Wow, looking forward to hearing you too. Thanks all. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. As I said, I'm Blanca. And I'm a principal engineer as well, or actually I was, because I'm currently on a career break, but I've been working in the data platform at the BBC for more than 5 years. Thinking back, when I was in my principal role, one of the biggest challenges for me was understanding how to be effective as a principal engineer and how to kind of amplify that impact. So I am beyond excited to hear from very experienced people that we have today with us. So in this webinar, we're going to be hearing examples of what the role of principal engineer means day to day in different organizations. So this is not kind of the job descriptions, but what it actually means. How do you get there? Okay, and does it even translate? Okay, we have a few people here who have moved companies. So is it the same in different places? We could be talking about this for hours, okay? So you're gonna get only a brief taste today. Even in my time at the BBC, I spend a lot of time internally talking to other principal engineers and just kind of understanding what does it mean in different teams. But I hope today you gain some things that you can take away, that you can action and actually help you plan your development into the role, or to give you some food for thought if you're already doing it. So we're gonna start our discussion hearing from Nayana. And what was your journey in becoming a principal engineer, and what do you find the most important aspect of it?
So for me, I actually started my career as a QA engineer. So thinking about quality by design and stuff is where I started my career. But then slowly moved on to how does this quality thing translate to engineering? And like, if I was an engineer, what does that actually mean? So I moved on to more of an engineering role. And then slowly moved up the ladder kind of thing, and was promoted as a principal engineer when I was at the Financial Times. And there, it was actually a 50-50 kind of split between 50% of the time you're thinking about tech strategy and technology side of things, and the other 50% of the time you're thinking about people and people management and all of those. So I found it a hard balance to actually be like, I found people management quite rewarding at that point. So I was like, oh, I can spend 90% of my time on people management. And I kind of found myself finding it hard to actually find a balance between thinking about people and also thinking about tech strategy and stuff. And there, the principal engineer actually reported to a tech director, whereas here at the Lego Group, when I moved, it's a pure principal engineer role where I only have to think about tech strategy and the tech vision and all of those, and less about the people management side of things. And it's also, I find this probably like a slightly higher level to what I did at the Financial Times, because here this role reports directly to the VP of the Marketing and Channels Technology itself, where this is more of a director level role is how I would probably look at it. And how, like, as I've moved over these roles, I've actually recognized that you need to be good with tech and have that kind of strategic vision of what the tech should look like in 6 months' time, not dive deeply into today's problems, but think about what tomorrow's problem could look like and how can we prepare our teams for tomorrow's problem. The other aspect of this, which kind of is something that some people might take a blind eye to, is, oh, this is an individual contributor role. Does that mean I don't have to work with people? Does that mean I don't have to care about culture of the organization? But no, that is another very important aspect of being a principal engineer, as to how do you nudge the organization towards a culture of like innovating at pace and like continuous delivery, all of those kind of things. So I feel like those are aspects of engineering and people which we will have to consider being a principal engineer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can definitely relate that the culture is also important. I sometimes got told in my role as a principal, like, but you stick to the tech. And I kept thinking, well, the people, I work with people at the end of the day. Yeah, I'm very, carrying on from how do you get there? Lynn, in a previous chat before this call, you shared with our group that there was a skill that actually was crucial for you into reaching this principal engineer level, and that was sense making. Can you tell us about it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So sense making is actually a term that I heard about first from a chapter in a book written by somebody from the MIT Sloan School of Management. And it's one of the 4 capabilities that they teach for leadership. And so sense making is basically taking a look at what's going on the ground, like the ground truth, the context that people are working in, and trying to come up with a map or a story that explains what's going on, so that you can have a shared understanding with the other people around you that gives you kind of a basis to act from. And it doesn't need to be perfect. There are going to be a lot of unknowns in there, and you just need to incorporate those unknowns, and as you act and as more data comes in, factor that into your map or your story of what's going on. And so sense making, like I said, is part of this framework of leadership that has other capabilities that are visioning, coming up with that future vision for where you want to go to, and inventing, coming up with the ways to get to that future place, and relating, the relationships with your peers. And so I find that when people think about the principal role, a lot of times they do think about the visioning and the inventing, and sometimes think about the relating. But I think that sense making is something that people don't actually think of as much as a critical capability for this role. But it really is, because you need that, that understanding, that shared understanding, in order to vision and figure out where you want to go to, and in order to get everybody to feel comfortable acting. So it's something that I found to be really powerful in my work. I talked about how I do code cartoons. An example of doing sense making through code cartoons was I collaborated with some other people who take on leadership roles in the WebAssembly community to come up with a post MVP future kind of map for what we were doing in WebAssembly. I designed it as a skill tree, like if you have in video games. And that really helped us all have conversations about what, are we actually putting, the vision in place for people to follow as we're developing out this ecosystem, and where do we actually need to start thinking about things differently. And so I highly recommend that people actually start thinking about developing this skill. I'll post a link to the book chapter in the lead dev Slack, because it's something that you can do. Even you don't need to have anybody assign it to you. You can actually just start doing this with your teammates, with your management team, starting to collect this information and put it together into some kind of story a map that you can start checking with people and say, does this actually represent what you see the context being? And through that, you can get some attention, you can get people starting to pay attention to you as a potential candidate for a principal role. So it's something I highly recommend that people start thinking of as a core skill.
Thanks, Lynn. So what I've got so far from both you and Nayana is that, well, you're a single person, but you actually are working within a context and you're kind of bringing people together with you. And I wanted to now move on to Brian and kind of ask you, is there a principal engineer role? Is it like a broad role? Is it a specialist one? Are there different archetypes?
The answer to your question is yes. Yes. It's all of this and many more things. So, I look at a principal engineer as a signifier, or that it signifies what level of the organization you participate at. So in companies like VMware, and actually Google would be very similar too. When we think about the principal role, we are influencing VPs and senior vice presidents. And actually, if I email the CEO of VMware, he'll respond in about 15 minutes. Always does. But when we talk about the different types of archetypes of principal engineers, we think about this, and this is actually something that we've thought about at VMware. So right now, I think we have 4 or 5, and they are the deep expertise coder, and that person would be the person who actually can get in and do the code. We're not a web company. VMware, for all intents and purposes, invented the modern concept of virtualization. So when you think about that, what does that actually mean? Well, somebody actually has to understand the processor at a certain level and be able to create these hypervisors with which to run your virtual machines on. And we have a few of those. But then also we have big projects. We have big cloud projects, we have big data center projects, and we also have engineers who are architects, and they think more of an architecture role. And then it varies on how hands-on they are. I'm hands-on. I love to code. If I can code in 4 languages in a week, I'm happy. And I like that. But I also have peers who don't, who stick. They actually are more of string pullers and making sure that the right people are looking at the right things at the right time. But then also, because we're such a large company and we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and we want to make sure that all contributions are appreciated, we're also thinking about 2 other types. The open source engineer, because that we have a big component in open source, and an example project would be Kubernetes. We have people who spend full time doing this, and we want to be able to recognize and celebrate the contributions at the principal level. If you are working on Kubernetes at a company strategic level, you should be a principal engineer. And then also, because what we do is hard, I actually will just say it's hard. We also have a big research component as well. And we have a few research principal engineers. We're all peers. There's 40 some odd of us out of 35,000 people. And we all do our different things, but we all work at the same level of influence. We're trying to make sure that VMware succeeds through the business unit that we work through. So at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing, but we contribute on different levels.
Thanks, Brian. I am glad you've already kind of tackled the do you code or do you not code, because that's kind of the never-ending question for every principal I've talked to.
So real quick here, I mean, this is just my opinion. I am not speaking for anyone except for Brian Clifton-Lyles. If you don't code, I don't like you having an engineer title. It's just how I feel. You can get another title and it can be the same thing, but let's actually, let's not confuse the world. And that's just my opinion. Hate me wherever you want to on social media.
Well, we like opinions as long as they're respectful. So, respect. I think there's a broad spectrum, but let's move on. Let's move on to Stephan now and hear more opinions here. So we discussed the principal engineer being a multiplier effect, and how does this align in your view with being considered to be in the individual contributor track?
Yeah, so I mean, I can only share my personal experience, which I think is probably more biased towards digital product companies, digital internet product companies. And I think that's an interesting contrast maybe with some of what Brian was just talking about in terms of the super deep folks that you might have in companies focused on solving some other problems as well. But in my experience, well, the first thing to say is principal engineers need technical skills. Absolutely. Those are essential. But you might be using those skills, less to write the most performant algorithm you can for the organization, and maybe more to improve the operating environment as that organization scales. So that's going to be things more like looking at architecture, either at a code level or maybe at a distributed systems level, things like engineering practices, continuous delivery, test strategy, things like that. And also, how you as an organization effectively leverage cloud infrastructure, containers, serverless, things like that. It's all about sort of maximizing impact and improving the overall effectiveness of the organization. At the same time, as a principal, you still are expected to be able to dive into tactical problem solving. So, you need to be able to roll your sleeves up, and you're kind of expected to be able to help wherever there's a problem. And that means potentially diving into languages and paradigms you're not familiar with and upskilling quickly. And I think it's really important to bring those technical skills because you need credibility with the rest of the engineering organization. You're asking people to trust your advice. You're asking people to be willing to give you their precious time. And I think that means you need to demonstrate that you're actually able to add value in the technical space. But that said, you don't have to be the deepest technical expert, I don't think, in the organization. And I think similarly to being a technical lead within a single team, you can't possibly constantly be up to date on every late new development, every new framework. If you were, you wouldn't be focusing on all of the problems you're supposed to be focusing on. So you lean on other people when you learn from them as well. But I think what's important as a technologist is you're aware of the universal things that make sense, regardless of the kind of software you're building, the kind of engineering teams you have. So that's the kind of technical skill. So absolutely that features. But you make heavy use of a whole bunch of other skills as a principal engineer, at least in my experience. And that's because of the breadth of the problems that you're looking to solve and the breadth of the solutions that you're trying to come up with or trying to work with other people to design. And at that level, the solutions are not just technical solutions. They involve people, and so do the problems. Firstly, that means you're interacting with people a lot more. Communication, listening, empathy, writing, influencing, facilitation, collaboration. Those are all, core skills that you need. But also you rely on other people's success a lot more. You rely on other people a lot more for your own success and for the success of the initiatives that you're pushing. So it might be that you're relying on engineering managers or product or engineers at the coalface to sense what the problems are, or maybe to sense how solutions that have been applied in the past are working out or aren't working out. You rely on folks to help you design appropriate solutions in collaboration. You rely on people buying into the visions that you might define and executing on those visions. And you rely on sponsorship from engineering management to have that authority. So, there's a lot of people interaction that comes from it. I think another thing that comes with the breadth of the problems that you're facing is the ability to analyze data, to generate insights, to synthesize that, and to prioritize. So that means things like making trade-offs based on your situational awareness. That might be business strategy. It might be the organizational structure, deadlines, cross-functional requirements, available resources, all sorts of things that feed into how you prioritize. And then you need to be able to pull clarity from ambiguity, because there's ambiguity everywhere when you're dealing with breadth. And then lastly, I think it was already mentioned, forecasting the future, looking ahead. You also need to think about breadth in terms of that. So these are all kind of those broader analytical skills that you need. And then often you'll be asked to kick off an execution. So you'll be bootstrapping something. And that means thinking about de-risking technical delivery, failing fast, learning quickly, and also what's the right skill mix that a particular initiative is going to need to succeed. So all of those skills for me, they kind of fall outside of, hard technical skills. And I think the thing is, as you climb the IC ladder, it's actually harder to just rely on those technical skills. You're going to be finding that you need more and more of those other skills as well. And I think when it comes to certainly product organizations that are scaling, they're not always solving super, super deep, purely technical challenges. They're facing, scaling challenges related to architecture or org design, dev productivity, continuous delivery. It could even be things like growing the number of technical leaders, or maybe adjusting the engineering strategy to meet the business ambitions. So, all of those things rely on all those other skills. As you progress up the scale, up the ladder, if you're going to be expected to kind of scale the impact that technology can have for the business through other people, then you need to broaden that skill set. So for me, that skill set falls under technical leadership more than just sort of the IC path. And actually, a pointer I would give is to look at Pat Kwa's Trident model. So he talks about the management track, the IC track, but also this kind of technical leadership track. So yeah, for me, in my personal experience, a lot of the time, principal engineers are on that sort of technical leadership track. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that means if you know that's where you're heading, you should be looking for those kind of opportunities at a team level as well. So being a technical lead, maybe being a coding architect. If you're someone that swings into management for a while, then having experience as a team lead or as an engineering manager, that's also great experience that will feed back into being able to be a great principal.
Oh, thanks for that. That was fascinating, and I was wondering, around the room here, what do others think? Do you think is it an IC individual contributor, or is it, like Stephan said, more part of the tech leadership? Brian, do you want to go?
Oh, wow. I think it depends on the particular problem. I'm only one person. I think I'm a super person, but I can't look at 15 things at once. As a matter of fact, I actually did the math. At about 4 high-level projects, I start to go a little crazy. But in those projects, I can still lead 10 projects. And really what it comes down to is sometimes it's really deep into the weeds. We need to figure this thing out. But also other times it's delegation to my staff engineers that I have. And I have actually a large group of 20 plus staff engineers that I can delegate tasks to. So for me personally, I still consider myself getting these things done if they're delegated out, if they're handled on time and successfully. So you have to realize that when you grow to this level, your ability to get things done grows beyond what you personally can get done, but also around who you can mentor, train, influence to do things for you as well. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. Nayana or Lynn, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so I agree that it is a technical leadership role. And that's partially because where I started in the principal level, Mozilla actually was pretty explicit about that as you moved up, you moved away from being an IC and into this technical leadership track. I actually have a close colleague who moved over to Fastly with me from Mozilla. But at Mozilla, when he was getting promoted to distinguished engineer, they actually told him that if he spent more than 10% of his time hands-on coding, that he needed to take a step back and think about ways that he could reduce the amount of time he was spending on coding, because they really were looking for you to be working through other people, through this, the connections with other people. And so that experience, that, that coaching that I had as how to be a principal stayed with me, and it is something that I've brought with me to the principal role at Fastly. But I think that, there are, of course, are different, every company has their own vision of what a principal is. And so it will definitely vary across orgs.
And for me, I think it was the reason I moved to the Lego group from the FD, where they also had the principal engineer role. It was a split between engineering management and the whole tech strategy side of things. And I thought if I moved to a different organization, I don't have to really worry about the engineering management, which is not completely true, is what I found out. That yes, the admin part of engineering management, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about doing people's PDRs and all of those things, but you still care about leading people and influencing people to actually make an impact, rather than you spending 10, 20 hours of your time just doing engineering or coding or architecting or whatever it is. I think it's how you influence people so that they can actually do all of that, is how I figured out over this transition, that it's not just an IC role, but it's more of a tech leadership role that we have, like at the principal level, is what you have to think about.
Thanks, Nayana. That very nicely leads on to kind of almost the next section that I had planned. So we want to have a look at what does success look like, because we've been talking about how you delegate, you empower other people, and what skills you use for it. So Lynn, what have you seen the most successful principal engineers focus on?
Yeah, the folks that I've seen be most successful are people who, one, make sure that we're asking the right questions, because I think that that's actually where a lot of engineering goes off the rails, is that you're not even starting with the right question. And so making sure that you are putting a spotlight on that, and gathering information from people that might not be explicitly stated. And you have to find ways to do that. Sometimes the best way is not in a big meeting. Sometimes you have to follow up after a meeting to do a one-on-one if you sense somebody was hesitating to say something. So making sure you're asking the right questions. And then I found that a lot of times the most impactful principal engineers aren't the ones that actually come up with the big vision that's totally their own big vision, but are actually eliciting pieces of that big vision from the people around them. And the skill of the principal engineers I've seen be impactful is weaving that together into a vision that is composed of multiple people's visions. So one person, I was just talking about the colleague I have that's a distinguished engineer. He was actually a co-creator of WebAssembly. And I think that one of the reasons why WebAssembly has been successful is because of his own skill of getting what the Googlers had to say, and getting what Apple and getting what Microsoft folks, their experiences, and weaving that together into this vision that has proven to be very successful. So I would say those are the ways that I think you can be most impactful as a principal engineer.
So influence seems to be coming up a lot in this conversation. And Brian, you've already mentioned which people who will answer your emails and your calls very quickly. But how do you get them to really listen?
So how do you get people to listen to you? Well, it's all about trust. And there's things that you can do early in your career that will lead to people listening to you. One is sincerity. People know what sincerity is. But also, and this is one of the hardest things that I learned, but I do it all the time now, is you, as an individual contributor, give away your biggest idea. There's no reason for you, me, Brian, to hoard an idea. If I need something to be done, I share my idea with whoever will listen to it, and I give them credit for it whenever they actually make it happen. What does that do? Well, first of all, this person knows that Brian has good ideas, so they start listening to me, so I have influence. And then people start realizing that goodness emanates from where I am. So if you want to be with the cool kids, go hang around Brian. And you start that in the small, whenever you're just starting out your career, all the way to where I am now. And now, like I said, my scope is all the way up to the CEO. And you know what? I'm gonna be very honest with you. Some people just won't listen to me. People think they know better, and that's fine. Maybe they do. But here's the thing that I will always do. If I say something, and this is something you should keep in mind, if I say something, I never say, oh, this is just what I think. I'll say, here's what we should do, and here's 15 reasons why. And I am not sold on this idea, but I think in lieu of better evidence, these ideas are a pretty good, this direction is a pretty good choice. please, I'm a scientist. Please change my mind. And once you do that to people, a lot of people will run away. And it's not me being a jerk. It's actually saying it's not Brian. It's the evidence that Brian got. And if you learn how to do this throughout your career, you'll notice that people start listening to you more. And then here's another thing. And this is actually another big bit. Hey, you know what? I was wrong. And don't qualify it. Don't qualify it with anything. Just say, I was wrong. Or not because, I didn't eat breakfast because I don't eat breakfast, or because of someone else. No, I was wrong. Or I was wrong and we should have listened to you. And if you learn that, so it's more about sincerity and humility, giving your ideas away, allow you to wield influence. You can buy influence, you can bully influence, but the 3 ways that I told you will actually give you that basically that organic influence that will lead you to levels that you probably can't even imagine right now.
I love how it sounds to me like you're the master of whispering to people's ears, in a really positive way, Brian. What you said about admitting that you're wrong and also offering reasons, but inviting people to challenge you. I think that's really powerful.
Yes, but I'll say one last thing though. I will do that, but understand that I'm no pushover. I mean, I've researched it. And I'm not saying it because I want to hear my voice. I'm saying it because there's 10 other things we can do right now. So let's solve this problem. So also, maybe that's the 4th thing. Realize that everyone has their own challenges and their own ambitions, but never be a pushover. Stand up for yourself. And as a person of color in the United States, I've really had to learn that.
All of you, Brian. Well done, seriously. Because I know it's hard, okay, especially when you are not kind of the standard white male. It's even harder, and people don't see that. So well done. This influence. So I said we're gonna see how you influence, but how you measure success in this role. So we're gonna move on to Nayana and kind of discuss a bit about measuring success. How do you go about this? Do you metrics or how?
Oh, this is hard. I mean, especially at the level at which we are and the impact we are expected to have on an organization, there's no instant gratification, which, like, if you were as an engineer, you would write some code and you push it to production. There's that instant feedback of, oh, I pushed this, and you know that you have actually achieved something. Where for us, I think there's a lot more thinking that we need to do about where can we actually have an impact. One of the things we've done at the Lego group, like we are around 13 principal engineers across the Lego group, and we have set this clear vision and mission statement on what is the mission that the principal engineers are here for. Like, what are we trying to work towards? And then for me, in the past, what I've often done is set some personal goals, which actually is wide enough and not like specific to, oh, I want to move a needle in product A or product B, but more looking at the organization and thinking about how can I do something that would impact the organization itself or would help the. So I'm thinking in terms of either the business should have an impact or the management above you will have an impact based on what you do over the year, or like that is one aspect of it where you're looking upwards, but at the same time you also need to look at engineering and the engineering teams itself and what kind of an impact you can have on the engineers itself and the teams that you work closely with. So when you're setting goals, it's very essential that you think about both impact above your level in your organization or across the organization, but also deeper impact on individual teams and stuff, which is where I think what Stephan was saying earlier, you might have to roll up your sleeves and do some work, or you might have to write loads of document to actually get to the place that you want to get to. So being able to have or articulate clear goals for the year, and be sure that very rarely you will have your goals completed in 3 months. I mean, if you do have your goals completed in 3 months, you should actually be thinking, did I set myself a good enough goal for the year? So it's anything that takes 6 to 8 months to sometimes even more than a year is where I think the goals are. So it'll take time for your goals to actually show an impact. And like like for me, I've joined an organization and it's only been 2 months. I'm looking at what can I achieve in the next year and a half that actually shows that I have had an impact in the organization. So, and working towards those kind of long-term goals is how I would probably go about measuring my success over the year. I mean, it's hard. Like right now, when I'm looking at what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, am I really being useful to the organization? I have questioned myself quite a few times over the last 2 months. But then it's not a short game. It is a marathon, and that's what we're here for. So that's how we should probably be looking at goals as a principal engineer.
Thank you. I've seen a lot of nodding here. So I think everyone seems to be, in agreement on this case. Stephan, I'd like to, go back earlier about how you said having authority in the role, and how do you best exercise that authority to benefit your organization? And this is aligned with what Nayana was discussing about your goals and achieving things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you are trusted by the organization to identify what the biggest problems are that need focus and also what the most effective solutions might be. And that's a huge responsibility. And what comes with that is also the responsibility to direct what will always be limited resources efficiently, so that the org has to choose every year what it's going to go after. And you have a lot of trust given to you to kind of advise on that. So you really need to think carefully about where you're shining the light, I guess, is what I would say. In terms of how you use that authority effectively, you should ensure you're working on the most impactful things. That's pretty much the guiding rule. So it's all about prioritization. It's all about constantly asking, am I working? Am I focusing on the most important things? And that's super hard to answer, obviously, on your own. So you need to have a network of people that can give you feedback on that, whether that's engineering management, products, or engineers who can give you that sort of coalface feedback as well. But also those folks will guide you to the problems that you should be highlighting to management, for example. Also, once you know you're working on the right thing, you need to figure out whether you're actually applying effective solutions. So are you actually designing things that will actually deal with the issues at hand? Something that throughout my career, way before I was a principal engineer, that I've always used is trying to co-create solutions with other people. Always found that the best solutions come from effective facilitation and collaboration, way more than ever coming from a single mind, so to speak. So I still try to do that as much as I can. Another thing is to show you're working, right? Like show people how you got to the solution that you're suggesting, all of the assumptions you made, all the data you collected, because that's a way to keep yourself honest and to sort of figure out if there's some blind spots as well. And I guess the last thing I think is really super important when you're setting out to solve a big problem is to define the measures of success. You've got to define, how will we measure this? How will we know? What's the baseline right now? Are there any leading indicators that mean we can figure out if we're going in the right direction early or the wrong direction early as well? Because I think, as Nayana was saying, some of these things have a long feedback loop. They take a long time to have impact. So what can we put in place to learn early? I guess a slightly different angle to authority is you need to be really conscious that you're not becoming a bottleneck to authority. That can happen in a few ways, right? Like it can be on an execution level. You're always going to be pulled into a million different things. You want to make sure you're not on the critical path for a super important initiative where if you're not around, it can't make progress. So you need to be looking at ways to delegate that to other people. And actually that takes me on to the other kind of bottleneck you can be, which is being a bottleneck to people's growth. You need to know that, the authority you have isn't always being used in a way that means other people aren't taking decisions. So you need to think about setting other people up and sponsoring them and making sure problems are actually being given to them. And also the responsibility for outcomes is being given to them. And then I guess the last thing I'd say about authority is it really is important that principal engineers are willing to fail in public and actually be vulnerable in public, right? Reflect frequently on how it's going, but then document what you've learned and make that open to other people, because you will create a culture where that happens throughout the organization.
Amazing. I think that last part about being vulnerable really resonates with me, because it's very easy for other engineers to kind of put principal engineers up in a pedestal and kind of think like that's how I need to be, and never show that anything is going remotely wrong or that you made any mistakes. So yeah, I was wondering, does anyone else want to add anything to what Stephan said about wielding your influence, and how do you go about it?
Wow. This is one of my favorite topics of all times. But I was giving you lists before, but let me give you something else. Whenever your word goes beyond you as a person, it means so much better. I work with people who live in India and China, and I'm sleeping while the Chinese people are working. I write everything down. And Stephan said, you have to show your work. I am a big proponent of writing everything down, but not in a PowerPoint, because when we read a PowerPoint, when you see arrows, well, what does that mean? This is why you should learn how to write things out in long form, but succinctly. And you'll get it right, because people will start doing things when you're not around. And that's actually when you're winning. When you're in a conversation talking about something that was not a failure, but it's not pushing the bar forward. When things happen around you asynchronously, that's when it is. And when we talk about influence, whenever you can start making things happen whenever you're not in the room, that's when influence, that's real power, that's real influence. Thank you.
I don't know what to say now. But no, I agree. If you can go to bed and then the work is happening, you've done your role. Okay, I believe we've just reached out of time. I know there's 7 questions that were submitted, but we're going to take those off into the Slack channel, okay? And all our panelists will go over there for, I think, a few minutes and answer any other burning questions that you might have. But thank you, everyone. Okay, I think for me, I was going to summarize the takeaways. I kind of agree that it's part of the technical leadership, but there's a broader spectrum. And for me, you have to at least have coded for part of your career. In my principal engineer role, Brian hate me, I wasn't really coding, but I could dive into code if needed. And I felt okay with that I had to kind of just hand that over because there were other people better equipped for it. But for me, what I would take away from today is, influence, authority, and bringing other people along and not being that bottleneck. And I think that underrated skill of writing things out is very, very important for communication. Okay, English is not my first language. So for me, being able to write things and kind of digest at my own pace has been crucial. Okay, and I think it is for others. It kind of helps you think things through. But, I'm going to thank you, everyone, for your insights today. We're going to move the conversation to the Staff Plus channel, and please join us there, and we'll see you there.